Are these the types of things that the Met is getting wrong?
Basically, I wouldn't say getting wrong. I think at the moment the problem the Met has got, apart from issues around leadership, recruitment, vetting, and the public perception of the Met, is the fact that they are overwhelmed, quite simply overwhelmed with what they're supposed to be doing. Every month you get someone saying you need to do more about this, you need to do more about that. And when it happens, officers are taken away from one lot of duties and put on another lot of duties to deal with that particular problem. Moped crime, you might remember, was one example. And they really are under pressure. The poor officers on response, PBR, poor bloody response, they're the ones who you see blue lights, two tones, rushing to emergencies. Not enough of them, nowhere near enough of them. On my borough, when I was a young PC, we would field 17 to 20 vehicles to cover Ealing, the borough where I live. Now you're lucky if they get 7 vehicles out there. Sometimes less. Some boroughs are covered by 1 vehicle for a whole shift. They're really struggling, and part of that, you have to say, is it's got to be down to senior management for letting that happen. I was on Twitter yesterday, and lots of officers were coming back when I mentioned this problem, saying, this is what we had to put up with, this is what we had to put up with. That's at the front line. That's the police that people see. That's the reason why you don't necessarily get your calls answered, or you go home and find your house has been burgled. But unlike in our time, where we would go round, perhaps no one will turn up at all. If you've got suspects on, if someone's in your house and burgling it, then everyone will move to get there, if there are units available. And mental health, my goodness, 40,000 calls the Met responded to last year, with people with mental health, a serious problem for police who have to deal with it, and most of the time deal with it extremely well. My friend's a mental health nurse. She's a point of contact for police in North West London. She has nothing but praise for the patience, kindness, compassion of officers who have to deal with these difficult cases, sometimes for hours and hours at a time. Does that get the publicity? No. When something goes wrong, yes, it should. But at the moment, the whole force is being collectively smeared, and that's really harsh on those who are doing a fantastic job.
Donna Jones, you speak to the challenges of Hampshire, but I wonder if we can just focus on the Met to begin with. It is by far and away the biggest police force in the United Kingdom. It faces particular challenges, doesn't it? Obviously, it's in charge of things like coordinating our response to terrorist attacks and that sort of thing. But it's also, it would seem to some people, and certainly over the years I've talked to former officers about this, it's had particular problems with retention. And you could argue there's that missing layer of experienced officers who have that trickle down of knowledge and experience to the new recruits. And the new recruits are being taken on after the cuts of 10 years ago. But there is that gap, that experiential gap.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And as well as being the commissioner here in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, I am also the national lead for victims amongst police and crime commissioners. So do kind of speak across the UK with that voice. And I think there are 3 things the public want from policing. Number 1, they want them to solve crimes, detect crimes and get dangerous people off our streets or in some kind of community punishment if they're not going to prison. Number 2, they want them to prevent crimes. And number 3, when the police do have, powers given to them by statute of law in this country, they want them to use those powers appropriately, and they want them to use them in a proportionate way. And I think, I actually agree with a number of the points that Chris has just made. There are thousands upon thousands of excellent, upstanding men and women working in the Metropolitan Police Service, whether they be officers or they be police staff or volunteers. And unfortunately, there have been a number of failings in the Met over the last couple of years that have led to them being or going to be put into special measures when that inspectorate report is published in the next couple of weeks. Do I think that's the right thing to do? Well, actually, with calm reflection, yes, because when a force is put into special measures, it means one thing: things can only get better. I do think that there have been a number of issues in the Metropolitan Police Service, and coming back to the point that you've just made, that it is the largest police force in the UK. There are 43 police forces in England and Wales, and the Metropolitan Police is by far the largest. And actually, if you look at the issues in the Met Police, they're not dissimilar to dysfunctional policing behaviours in capital cities around the world because of the complexities of the demographics, the levels of serious organised crime, the harm on that's coming into those very built-up conurbations. Now, that's not an excuse, that's an explanation for people who are watching your programme and scratching their heads as to why this has all come about. So I do think that the Home Office, the Home Secretary, the Policing Minister, Kit Malthouse, surely must now be given consideration to whether or not the Metropolitan Police is just too big, and whether or not it's, to empower perhaps district commanders more, to give them back the flex, as Chris has said, to when he was, policing the streets of Ealing with a much bigger command structure, and I'm sure a much more empowered district commander in that area. So is the Met too big? Should we be looking to break it up into, multiple smaller police forces, or should we be looking to alter their command structure to give district commanders actually the flex that they need to be able to make London streets safer?